Well, as a kid, I don't remember there being a lot of books in my house. My mother read, but she read like Harlequin romances, and she read. There was this humorist at the time, Irma Bombeck. She wrote these books. One was called "The Grass Is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank," and "If Life Is a Bowl of Cherries, Why Am I Always in the Pits?" Those were the books laying around the house, so I devoured I was reading romance novels and stuff because I had such a hunger for it. But the truth is like when I got to school and really well-meaning educators would put things in my hands like Old Yeller and, Little House on the Prairie, which was just something I couldn't really relate to. They were all, well-intentioned, but they bored me, to be fairly honest. And it wasn't until a school librarian in the fourth grade noticed I had never checked a book out of the school library. And she made me read The Mouse on the Motorcycle, that's a turning point in my life. I've said this before, but the truth is the reason I loved it, being that age and a boy, I was just, one, it was really funny, and two, it was a big adventure, and most importantly, it was pointless. There was no heavy-handed moral lesson. The Mouse on the Motorcycle wasn't going to make me a better person. That's what I wanted.
Welcome to the Curious Cat Bookshop podcast, the podcast of the independent bookstore of Winslet, creating a literary community in Northwest Connecticut, bringing our local authors to the world and the world to our community in Northwest Connecticut. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another episode of the Curious Cat Bookshop podcast. And we are so happy today to be here with Michael Buckley. Hi, I'm Stacy Whitman, the founder and former publisher of Two Books, which is an imprint of Lee and Low Books. And I'm the owner of the Curious Cat Bookshop, and we're at 386 Main Street in Winslet, Connecticut, which is up in the northwest corner. If you're interested in any of our events, local or online, you can find them at curiouscatbookshop.com/events. And if you love this conversation and want to buy the book, please order it from us. You can order online from us at curiouscatbookshop.com, or we've got the link below. So, first of all, welcome to Michael Buckley. Yay!
Thanks for having me.
No problem. You're the New York Times bestselling author of The Sisters Grimm. We're going to talk about that in a moment, and Nerds, among many others. You're also a TV writer and producer, which I didn't realize. And your new book is The Weirdies. And congratulations on this week's announcement that The Sisters Grimm is going to be an Apple TV show.
Yeah, it's been a big week. We had a television show announcement. The Weirdies came out on Tuesday, and my dog turned 10. There was a lot of things going on.
Well, it's so exciting because The Sisters Grimm is one of those books that when I first became a children's book editor, it came out right about the same time. I was working at Wizards of the Coast, and I actually listened to it on CD as I was driving to work. I still remember, I went back and looked at this, and I'm like, what is it about a great narrator of a book that when you go back to the text, you're like, you can just remember exactly how they said it. Like, what's the Ms. Smirt, the caseworker, the way he said Ms. Smirt just stuck with me. But I lost my train of thought where I went out of order. So in many ways, that series inspired me as an editor because I was thinking I want to acquire more books like that. And at Wizards, we were doing a lot of fantasies. It was a lot of fun. But that was 2005, and you've published a lot of books since then, right?
I think it's 22 or 23. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Yeah.
And tell me about I didn't realize that you're a TV producer. Are you working on also kids shows?
Yes. When I first got to New York from Akron, Ohio, I was an intern for David Letterman. And that kind of opened up a lot of opportunities. And I started pitching television shows almost immediately to places like VH1 and MTV and Nickelodeon. And the thing about that kind of career is it's real feast or famine. It's like you're either doing really well or you're not doing really well at all. So I had a lot of near misses. I had to deal with Nickelodeon for a little while. I had deals with MTV. I sold MTV a game show that never aired. And I had a show at Cartoon Network a few years ago called Robotomy. And now The Sisters Grimm, I'm the EP on it, and I'm in the writer's room. And, working on a variety of other stuff. It's always been almost like my side hustle, which is an odd thing to call a television producing
Right,
career.
right.
But once children's
Well, it
books,
sounds like it's parallel tracks with your writing career,
it,
right?
it kind of does, yeah. But I think that the children's book thing wasn't exactly something I had given a lot of thought to
Hmm.
when I was younger. I didn't really think I was capable of writing a book. And then when it happened, I just fell in love with it. And I realized that first and foremost, I'm a children's book author.
Awesome. That I think is you are writing books that really understand that fourth and fifth grade reader, I think. I'm hearing a lot of parents and educators talk about how COVID affected reading and reading levels, how many kids are intimidated by big books. So, like 10 years ago, kids were reading those big old fantasy tomes, and now they're
Right,
intimidated by even graphic novels. And you say on your website that you write books for kids who don't like to read because you used to be one.
right.
So, talk about that. What drew you to writing for this age group, and how did you find your voice?
Well, as a kid, I don't remember there being a lot of books in my house. My mother read, but she read like Harlequin romances, and there was this humorist at the time, Irma Bombeck. Most people wouldn't remember her,
Oh
but
yeah, I remember her. My
yeah,
mom was really into reading her articles.
she wrote these
We
books
had
that
we
one
had
was
those,
called,
yeah, like bathroom books or something.
yeah, one was called The Grass is Always Greener Over the Septic Tank. And
Yes,
If Life is a Bowl of Cherries, Why Am I Always in the Pits? And
exactly.
those were the books laying around the house, so I devoured, I was reading romance novels and stuff
Uh-huh.
because I had such a hunger for it. But the truth is like when I got to school and really well-meaning educators would put things in my hands like Old Yeller and Little House on the Prairie, which was just something I couldn't really relate to.
Hmm.
And they were all well intentioned, but they bored me, to be fairly honest. And it wasn't until a school librarian in the fourth grade noticed I had never checked a book out of the school library, and she made me read The Mouse and the Motorcycle, which was
Oh, yes.
that's a turning point in my life. I've said this before, but the truth is, the reason I loved it, being that age and a boy, I was just one, it was really funny, and two, it was a big adventure, and most importantly, it was pointless. There was no heavy-handed moral lesson. The mouse and the motorcycle wasn't going to make me a better person, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want
Exactly.
to be preached to. I didn't want to be taught. I just wanted to sit in the window on a rainy day and pass the time with characters. And so that really started it. But again, like I said earlier, I didn't think I could write a book. I mean, it always rolled around in my head, but I had undiagnosed ADD until I was in my 40s. So I was what they call, back then, nobody knew what ADD was. I couldn't pay attention. I was always looking out the window. I was the class clown. I
Hmm.
would break into songs sometimes just in the hallway. And, like I was a peculiar kid. I mean, back then they just called me a pain in the butt. Now they call it ADD. But
Right, right.
I didn't think that I had the mental acuity to be able to sit down and write 50, 60, 70,000 words with characters in a world I had to invent and keep track of. That just seemed impossible. So when I did move to New York, I came up with the Sisters Grimm idea, and I thought this would be a really awesome TV show. And then all the people that I knew in television kept saying, it would probably be an awesome book. And then that would make me angry because, it just made me feel like somebody was telling me to do something impossible. But then I met my now ex-wife, but my girlfriend at the time worked in publishing, and she's like, people don't write books all by themselves.
Mm,
There's a team of people that help you. There's editors, there's art directors, there's a whole group of people who will help, and she offered to help as well.
hmm.
And when I realized I wasn't doing it all by myself, that's when I had I guess, the confidence and courage to give it a shot. And luckily, the first book I tried to write was the first book that I sold.
I was going to ask that because, like, some writers, they could write. Brandon Sanderson is famous for well, I don't know if he's famous for, but I went to college with him and we knew that he had written 8 books before
Wow.
Mistborn. And Mistborn sat with his editor, Moshe, at Tor for like a year before Moshe read it and reached out to him and said, "Oh, I'd like to publish this." And so he was writing his 12th book when Mistborn was in the editorial process. It's such a luck of the draw, depending on where you are in your writing journey. And I mean, and he had, that might have been, I think that his first book was probably written in high school. So, like, sometimes your first book really should just be in the drawer and just use those ideas
Usually, yeah.
later, you know? But that's wonderful.
I mean, I have to give a lot of credit to my first editor,
Mm-hmm.
Susan Van Meter at Abrams, who really taught me how to write. I mean, really taught me structure, which roads to go down and which ones to avoid. What I loved about her was that she wasn't like a nitpicker, big picture ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And those notes, those are the scariest notes, unfortunately, because those are the ones where you're like, wow, I get to start all over. But she was really helpful in steering me into what the Sisters Grimm finally became. If I had not had her, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't have happened at all.
Well, and what you were saying about writers don't do it alone, they also don't do it in one day.
Right?
Like, writing a book takes a long time, and it might, when you're talking about, I just got diagnosed with ADHD last year,
No?
and I've been an editor this whole time.
Yeah.
But learning how to break things down so that you don't have to try and do everything all at once was
Right.
probably part of your process as well, I imagine.
It's a bit of a, my process is so bizarre. You know,
Let's hear about it.
when you get to a certain age, eventually people are like, maybe you should teach. And then I'm like, what? I have an army of teachers. I retired. There's no way I would want to put myself in those shoes. But it comes as like a almost like a movie in my head. I see a scene, and then I'm like, oh, I can build a lot of things around that. And it's usually there's. You probably know this. You have a zillion ideas all the time. I mean, that's one of the superpowers of what we are dealing with is that
Hmm.
our imaginations are really, really wild. So I get ideas for books every single day. That's not even an
Oh
exaggeration.
yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
And then
So
the question is, how do you pin down
yeah.
the right one?
Which one do I think? Well, it's usually the one that's screaming the loudest in my head. That's generally the case. So I decide, and then I plot it out in big, big terms. I rarely really write anything down. I have a concept of, okay, this is the first act, this is the second act, here's where we're going to start the climax. And then, like, just it's really just the painstaking every day in the chair, hammering it out day by day, looking at it, realizing it's terrible, it's fine, I'll fix it tomorrow. That's
Exactly,
kind of,
exactly.
yeah.
Being able to let it go and move forward, I think, is a big part of being a writer. And then
Right. I
being
mean,
willing to come back to and fix it later.
it's a lot like being like a sculptor. I mean, especially somebody who might like make statues of famous people. It's just like you've got the chisel and the hammer, and every day you get a little closer to the person that's
Yeah.
inside the big block of granite. So for people with ADD and ADHD, I know the term. I'm not even sure about it anymore,
Yeah. I
I
think
like,
right now it's just all ADHD, and then there's
yeah,
little bits, little parts of it.
yeah. I think that patience is not something that goes naturally with me.
Hmm.
But I have learned, with the help of some meditation and long walks and going to the gym every day, that I have been able to put myself in the right mental
Mm.
space. And I also am very forgiving. I'm like, some days I will sit down and I'll write for 7 hours, and some days I sit down and I write for 7 minutes. I mean, it's just that's just what the muse was gonna let me have
Hmm.
that day, and there's no use fighting it. It just
Well,
it is what it
and
is.
you just said that there's some days that you don't write, that at the beginning of your process you're not even writing anything down at all. But I earlier this year I talked with Lisa Mangum, who's a friend of mine who's an editor, and she wrote this book called Write Fearless. And she was talking about how what you're describing, it's all writing. It's all
Mhm.
part of the process. It's all part of the writing process,
Right,
that whether you're actually sitting down and writing something or just kind of working things out in your head, it's all part of the process.
right. I have a lot of faith in the subconscious. I used to tell people this all the time when I was an excuse for why I wasn't writing. I'm like, I'm writing. I'm doing it right now. You know, I was writing in the shower. I was writing at the beach. You know, like that's. I've been doing it all day. I'm exhausted. Um,
I've been working so
but
hard.
this is hard work. Um, but honestly, one trick that I have that I tell people when they ask is that if I'm stuck on a section, when I go to bed, I have a little notebook and I will write down the problem in the notebook, and then I go to bed. And I would say 9 times out of 10, when I wake up, the answer is waiting for me.
That's great.
Yeah, you
Just
have to put.
allow your brain to work on it in the background.
Yeah,
Give
you know,
yourself
like
some distance.
I think that's the problem with right now this kind of time in our world where people don't have any patience with boredom
Mm,
and they can't tolerate it. And I think that's why art is, I'm making it. Our boredom is a huge part of it. I
yep.
mean, it's like that being able to just be quiet and like not fill my head with music all the time and games and doom scrolling the news. And like
Mm,
you have to turn that stuff off. And sometimes you just have to look out the window as the
yep.
cars go by. And that's when the best stuff happens. It's like the
Hmm.
quiet moments is when the heavy lifting gets done.
When I was a kid, I would lay in bed and I would just, as I was trying to go to sleep, I would lay in bed and imagine stories. Like I would self insert myself into the Dukes of Hazzard. I would, I decided that
We've all
the
done
Duke,
that.
the Duke boys should have been my uncles, stuff like that. But those times where you're just imagining, I don't have many of those times anymore. And I don't know if that's adulthood or just lack of space from our modern life. I think that's a really great point.
I think it's like we fill our days with true crime and podcasts, and I mean, no offense, but I
But we
do
are talking about reading right now.
I do it myself. I'm listening to the Judge John Hodgman podcast right now, and the truth is, I should be like just being quiet and still, but
Well, I think it's all in balance as well as it's allowing ourselves the space for it. But back to reluctant readers, because I really think that the Weirdies really scratches that itch that it
thanks.
is an illustrated book. You've got a lot of pages with illustrations. Like every few pages, there's something for kids to look at. And I really think that there's such a, in fact, here's a side question for you that I didn't prepare, but I'm curious. You've never done a graphic novel, have you?
No, I made an effort once a long time ago, but no, I haven't made one yet.
That is all the rage right now. And I really see it in our like 7, 8-year-old, 9-year-old readers that come into the bookstore who are just like, they devour them and they
Mhm.
go back to them again and again. And also, illustrated books like this, I think, hook them in a way that just a big block of text right
Right.
now, they just don't have the attention span
No,
for.
they don't.
And I don't think it's diagnosing all kids with ADHD. I think, like, just what we were just talking about, like, we've just got so much pulling our attention that they're very visual right now. And the,
Right.
the illustrations really help with that.
Yeah, this isn't this. Yeah, these illustrations. By the way, the illustrator's name is Forrest Burdett, and he's
Hmm.
just a genius. I mean, these pictures are hilarious and
They're
bizarre.
great.
But none of this happened by accident. I have to give a lot of the credit to my editor, Andrea Colvin. And we had conversations when I brought her this. And she said, what we really need is something that is filled with illustrations and very, very visual and not
Hmm.
too long and really funny and full of lots of twists. And I was like, I think we can do that together. I mean, yeah, these pictures are just bonkers in here. So I just got the books last week. Like
Hmm.
get them, and you're just so busy you don't have time to actually sit and enjoy what you've done. And I keep looking at this. I'm like, this has got to be one of my favorite. I don't know if you can see it, but
Push it up just a little bit more there. I think, which page is it? I'll put it up to the
I
screen
don't know how.
because I think my lighting works better.
Yeah, but this it's a
What page?
page 56. It's like it's just a little boy trying to cut somebody's hair off in the playground, and it's
Oh,
just.
there it is.
I mean, it's just so
There's so
horrible.
much. This is the kind of This is the kind of thing that a kid would just stare at, though. Like,
Yeah.
look at all the things going on in this scene. It's
This
amazing.
is really what I wanted when I was 10 years old. This is, yeah, so
Did you read any Richard Scarry in the
yeah,
70s
I
or
did.
80s? I was obsessed with just poring over everything that was happening in the images. And I think kids love that, of
Mm,
seeing a new thing every time you look at it again.
right.
What I was going to say about this is that you've also got a highly stylized voice, I think, that is hooking kids as well.
Mm.
Is this the first time you're doing this? It feels like in the vein of Lemony Snicket almost.
It's,
What brought you to that voice for this particular book?
like before I sat down and wrote this, I think that my career didn't feel as stable as it had. I had a series before this. It was called Finn and the Intergalactic Lunchbox. Very well reviewed. I got a star review from somebody, and I loved it. And it came out the day they shut the country down for COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. The stories I've heard is that the shipments arrived and there weren't anyone at the bookstore to even get it, so it sat out in the
Mm-hmm.
weather with a bunch of
Oh,
other books. By the
oh,
time the stores were open, there was no point in promoting it anymore.
right.
So the second one came out. This one was called Finn and the Time Traveling Pajamas, and same thing happened. The day it came out, the
The next
country
shutdown.
shut down again for the second time. And then the third book came out, and I think the publisher was like, no, no, you're not going to get us again.
Those poor orphan COVID books. Yeah.
Right. And I also feel that there was a huge rush, and I don't mean to criticize anybody about what they love and what they like to write, but this book came out called Wonder,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was a beautiful story. My kid had to read it 7 times in school. They kept making him read it.
Oh,
It was the only book
oh.
teachers ever heard about, I guess. Everything felt like Wonder after that.
Mm.
And I'm writing these like very silly, big adventures with a little bit of heart. I've always believed that like you want to teach kids something, and you want to make them feel something, but you want to slip that in like a secret.
Yeah.
Things weren't quite so subtle for a while, and like
These
instead of
are our cookie. I wouldn't call them cookie books because there's a lot of great stuff that they're learning
Hmm,
from it, but they don't know they're getting their vegetables at the same time. There
yeah,
might
that's
be
the
cheese on
idea,
top.
right? I always say like you have to sneak the peas into the meatloaf, but for a little while it just felt like it was just peas.
Hmm.
So, when I sat down to write this, I wasn't even sure I wanted to keep doing it. I didn't know if there was a place for me left in children's publishing. I had, 2 hit best-selling series. That's something a lot of people can't ever get. I've
Hmm.
been blessed for sure. And I thought maybe my time ran out. Like sometimes I would see like other authors and realize that, a lot of them only wrote maybe 1 or 2 books
Like
their
all the
whole
people
life.
that you debuted with, maybe you're not
Yeah.
seeing them around, that
I'm
kind
not
of
seeing
thing.
him anymore, and I was just like, maybe it's over. And I started writing this actually collaboratively with 2 other authors. One was named is named Adele Griffin. The other one is Julia DeVillers, and they were like, "Oh, let's write this together and see what we can do with it." And I say about 10 days into it, they read what I had submitted, and they were like, "No, no, you should do this one on your own." I'm not sure where that narrator came from. I was always fascinated with, the Adams family was a huge thing for me growing
I
up.
can see that as an inspiration here. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that. Anything where the kids didn't fit in.
Hmm.
But I also loved that the narrator is sort of spilling so much of her personal life
Hmm.
into it, which I had never seen before. And I thought that's hilarious that she keeps talking about her ex-boyfriend and how what a terrible person he is and how she's trying so hard.
Well, and this is very much a little bit of an allegory about poor little rich kids not getting enough love as
Right.
well. But that's the peas that are just kind of slipped in there with
Yeah.
hilarious moments of kids who just do not understand the world.
And listen, I believe it, the way the world is set up right now, the rich need some serious mocking. And I'm going after them the best I can. So yeah, everybody in the book is completely out of touch with everything. They've lived this fabulously wealthy life. In the second book, They talk about they had somebody on the staff at the house whose job was just to take the blame for things that went wrong.
That sounds about right. I feel like you're taking a seed of reality and taking it, and that's what
Hmm.
hyperbole is taking it to the nth level of, you start with this normal thing that you would think about human behavior, and then you just kind of add layers on top of it, and that's what
Right.
makes it hilarious.
Yeah, I honestly I think the narrator makes me laugh harder than
Yeah,
what
she
the
adding
kids
her
do.
commentary throughout. Yeah.
Yeah, and how I can't wait for people to read the second one and see how it all wraps
So
up. There's a special secret about her that is revealed.
so I was looking on your website, and the Weirdies in audiobook has a different illustration. Is that just a did it come out in audiobook first,
Well, like I
or
said, yeah, it came out as an Audible original. Audible came to me and asked me if I had anything that they could have just for themselves.
uh-huh.
And through the negotiating of that, we were given the rights to publish it.
Oh, okay. So the
I will
book,
say, like,
the print book came out later.
yeah, I only
Okay. And Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet was the narrator for the first two, and
That's
then
amazing.
there's four of them all together, and the
Okay.
second two are narrated by Helena Bonham Carter.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
That's the perfect match.
yeah, I thought it was, yeah, it's nice. I especially enjoy how I had to explain the change in the narrator. It's a little bit of a single white female joke where Kate has been pretending to be Helena the whole time. So,
Well,
but
I'm really looking forward to that.
yeah, doing it as an audiobook was interesting. I have so much respect and loyalty to indie bookstores that I wasn't sure whether doing an audiobook was the right thing. I mean, so many of the stores in this country have been my cheerleader, have put me on their shoulders and carried me around, and I never want to jeopardize that relationship or feel like disloyal. So doing something outside of that realm where we're not dealing with an independent bookstore just felt wrong, and it took me a long
Hmm.
time to finally say, okay, this is probably something they might not even want. Because to be honest, I feel like the book is a little edgy and dark and funny. I had a kid read it not too long, and his review was that it was spicy, and I was like the best review I'll ever get. So like the very fact that it's a book and it's real in my hand is a surprise. I didn't think Audible would want it. I didn't think
Mm.
Little Brown would want it. I didn't think any kids would read it. So I just thought it was something I did for myself. And so,
Sometimes the best books come from that.
yeah.
But what I was going to say about, sorry, now Gigi has
Is
decided
that
that
the
she's going to
Curious
head bonk.
Cat?
Yeah, this is Gigi. She has to be here all the time when I'm here at the desk, and she needs to head bonk the microphone. So
There you go.
if you get bonking noises, that's her head.
Gee.
But no, I was going to say audiobooks actually, back to our conversation about reluctant readers, I think audiobooks are wonderful for reluctant readers. I was wearing a
Mhm.
shirt yesterday from Libro.fm that says I read while driving, because
Yeah.
like I said, I read the Sisters Grimm originally on audiobook. It really, whether it's an adult who's just trying to do other things while they're reading and getting more
Mm.
reading in, or a kid who might not read the best way on paper,
Right.
I think that audiobooks are amazing, and the narrator can really make or break your book as well. There was a book that came out roughly the same time as the Sisters Grimm that I really wanted to love. It was a steampunk fantasy. Like they were flying to the moon in the ether, that kind of thing. And the audiobook narrator, I'm almost positive, was an American trying to put on a British accent.
Oh no.
And it was terrible.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, oh, this is a book that I'm going to have to read on paper because I can't with a bad narrator. And this was, 2005 was before all the like apps for reading and stuff like that. So I'm getting an echo because of her. Um, so I think since then, the audiobook producing companies have really invested in people like Kate Winslet, Helena Bonham Carter, like real actors
Mhm.
who know how to pace a book, who have the right accent for whatever you're going for.
Yeah.
I think they're doing a great job.
It's funny when Audible asked me who I wanted to read it. I didn't think that Kate Winslet was on a list. I mean, that's crazy. I was like, well, I can get my brother Jeff to do it. That's how I felt. So yeah, I think these audio book production companies really stepped it up. I was stunned, and then she was so great. I mean, she did an interview where she talked about how much she liked it, and I think her kids were fans of the Sisters Grimm, which is how she came to it. And then Helen has just been a marvelous person to step in and take over. She's just as funny. Both of these women are who are probably not known for their comedies are deceptively hilarious
Mm.
and very, very talented. And so, fingers crossed that that kind of approach continues because I think I'd like to do more audiobooks of maybe other kinds of stories. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We've already she's decided that it's now do you see what she's doing?
Time to touch your base, yeah.
No, that's a you're not paying enough attention to me. You now need she'll grab my hand and be like, "No, that's
Should
where
we
the hand needs to be on top of me."
should we ask Gigi a few questions to make her feel like she's part of it?
I think that's all my questions except for I have one last question.
Okay.
And I'm trying this out in the last couple of episodes because a friend who does a poetry podcast said that he always got the best answers from the poets
Oh
that he
boy.
was interviewing. So he wanted to know what's your weirdest or most unexpected obsession?
This will definitely embarrass some people, but I am obsessed with professional wrestling.
Oh, cool.
My father introduced it to me when I was very little. There was a show that he watched pretty religiously called Georgia Championship Wrestling. And this is like wrestling. It just was something that was on all the time growing up. And, I went through this stage where I was embarrassed about it and like, this is ridiculous. And there was definitely some time in the WWF before it became the WWE, where some of the characters are just ridiculous. It's like there's he's the bad guy because he works for the IRS. I mean, that's a wrestler. Yeah, he was called IRS, and like so it was always like a job that they would turn them into a good guy or a bad guy, and like the baker, the barber, the kind of silly stuff. But as I've gotten older, I realized that it doesn't matter that it's not real. That there is theater going on
Hmm.
and storytelling that is planned out long in advance with a big room of writers. And I don't know, I love the theatrics of it. Like I've always enjoyed a big spectacle. Like one of my favorite rock bands is Kiss. And it's not because Kiss is good. In fact, I would say that Kiss is probably not great. But oh, what they created.
Hmm.
That's worth celebrating. And I love like big explosions and people doing backflips and impossible moves and acrobatics and the storylines. I mean, they had this storyline recently called the Bloodline, where a bunch of people who are all from the same family got together in a group and just dominated the whole show for almost 5 years. That kind of stuff, it marvels me that it was so enticing and gripping to me that I kept watching it. And when I say this, people laugh at me, but I'm like, Emmy,
Soap operas.
this is Emmy worthy television. It is a bit like a soap opera, but with lots of violence. So, but yeah, I think people would be surprised to know that not only do I really enjoy wrestling, I know a lot about it.
That's awesome. So we'll wrap up with Gigi finally deciding to leave the mic. So I guess that's that's her signal that it's time to end.
Yeah.
So the new book is The Weirdies, and you can pick it up from us, curiouscatbookshop.com. And where can people find you online?
Well, mostly you can find me on Instagram. I'm at What's Up Buckley, but I also have a website. It's a dusty relic of the past, but michaelbucklywrites.com. And I'm on the TikTok, What's Up Buckley there as well, on the TikTok. And but yeah, I think if you really want to reach me and learn more about what I do, Instagram is the best place to go.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everyone.
Stacy. Thanks for having me.